Okay. Well, thank you guys for being here. Today we're going to be discussing about professional development and if it helps and how it helps and how does it impact our students. So I guess the first thing I'm going to ask you is just tell me about the best professional development that you've had so far. Like what was significant about it?
Well, my professional development that I really, really liked was when I first started in the district, and it was Kagan training. And we got to go out to the Kagan in Michigan and really have a week's worth of full lesson in teaching and really getting the idea of how it should be implemented, which is really nice because it took you step by step with all the instructions and the strategies and everything, whereas nowadays it's a one-day training and then they want you to implement it and you're still like, I don't get it. So I think out of all of my trainings, Kagan has been the most successful for me because I still use it every now and then, especially for review time. It allows me to go back and see where the kids are stuck, where they get to do a round table and they teach each other and they get to go on.
Barraza, please return back to the front office. Reina Barraza, please return back to the front office.
And the kids actually help each other, so that was part of what Kagan strategies are about, is getting the kids to teach each other as well. But the activities that we have here now, it's a little more different, so I think that's my most successful training that I've had so far out of my teaching career.
So for me, when I first started here at Henderson, my first year of teaching public school was the RTI training we did in Denver. And it was really eye-opening as to what RTI should be and what it's not, and how a lot of the things that we do are ineffective. And it was something that I thought that would be really good, but unfortunately we didn't continue it.
Was that with you, Casey?
Yes.
Mine was PBIS, which was done here in El Paso, and what I liked about it was the fact that it really took a step back onto like modern day behaviors. Obviously, the way we were raised and brought up in the school setting is not the way people are brought up in school setting today. And so what I liked about PBIS, it kind of took us out of the mind frame that, you know, this is the way people used to teach, this is the way people now teach. And because of the modern times, we have modern certain behaviors that back then didn't really seem appropriate at the time, and now we just think of them as whatever. But with that said, you have the floodgates opening up. Well, if we allow this, and this is going to happen. And so it was a kind of rewiring and a redirection of the way teachers respond to certain behaviors in the classroom and the way we talk to students now. So instead of saying we don't run, we don't yell, we say things like we walk in the hallway, we talk at a discretionary level and everything. And so kids respond more to that rather than no now. And so I always thought that PBIS for me was the most impactful because it made me really look at, you know, as an incoming teacher and even as teachers that have been here for a while already, it's a different environment. It's a whole new different ballgame, and PBIS really opened my eyes to that.
Cool. Thank you.
Actually, mine was the active learning, the one that we had at Franklin maybe 3-4 summers ago. And I liked it because it actually involved a lot of the Bloom's taxonomy. It changed everybody's mind on the way you approach stuff in the classroom, from passing diddles to having the kids involved, using thinking maps, anything that involved the kids doing group work, but it was active learning, where you had different levels doing different things. So it kind of blended everybody in as far in the classroom, like the speds and the labs together with the regulars. But it was the active learning model training.
Okay, very good.
I think that was the best one.
Good. Do you think it affects us as teachers and maybe the district and the students when they flip so many different programs? For example, like the active learning, we're still following it, but like the Kagan that you said we don't use anymore.
Oh, that's
Do you think that kind of conflicts?
I think it's strange with our district is things will work, and once it kind of stops working, all of a sudden we drop it instead of trying to find a solution as to, hey, why did this not, what went wrong at some point? For example, your active learning framework, I remember going through the program as well, but our school started it and then all of a sudden just dropped the ball, so we got rid of it. And just like with the Kagan, for 2-3 years that it was implemented at my school, it was doing really well, and then we ended up changing administration, and then it got dropped. So I think it depends on the administration if they don't see it working to their, I guess, approval or I think that's what gets them to say, okay, we're not doing that anymore. And it's kind of sad because a lot of the teachers are like, well, you know, it really did work, but you go with what administration wants you to do. So I think it just depends on where it went wrong and why did they get rid of it is the question. So, but I think it just depends on what program we're doing.
And I want to add something to the one that she's saying, because we used to have the interactive notebook.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have one called the interactive binder, and it was almost the same. And teachers would get, and I don't know if you want me to say this, but they used to get written up if they walked in and you didn't have that binder. This was about 8-9 years ago. And if they walked in and they didn't see the binder being used, you would get written up. A lot of money was spent on those binders and on the training, but it was only for 1 year.
Wow.
After that, it was killed. So I think the district needs to hold on to something for at least no more than 4 or 5 years to give it a test.
Right.
If it works, continue. If you see that it doesn't, then put it away. But 1 year of trying is not enough.
Yeah, it should be, I think the turnaround, it should be 4 to 5 years.
4 to 5 years,
fidelity,
yeah.
right? For it to actually gauge whether it worked or
And
not.
I think the binder helped, but they got rid of it.
That's what they had said when we went to the RTI training. They said the biggest problem was that a lot of schools or districts, they just want to give up on something. If it doesn't work right away, you know, it's done. And the whole thing is that if whatever that they were explaining to us, if we wanted it to have results, is we had to stick to it for that 4 or 5 years. And like I know I haven't been in the district long, only 3 years now, so I can't necessarily speak to the, you know, do those programs stay around or not. But I can speak to the point that within 3 years they've heaped so much on top of us, so many new things, thing after thing after thing, that like I feel like I can't really grasp any of it well enough. Not any of it, but a lot of it well enough to be able to implement it in my class effectively. So I feel like that's connected, but yeah.
Well, if I can just play devil's advocate here for a sec, right? Because and this is coming from what you told me my first year when I did my first year here at Henderson. It's just that I understand that, you know, it's become saturated with all these initiatives and, you know, you just want to throw anything to the wall, see if it sticks and everything. But I remember it was, I think it was my first year here at Henderson where you told me that education is like a cycle. And pretty soon you're going to see the same thing. It's just going to be a different name to it.
Yes.
And so, so it's just like, we understand it's a saturation of initiatives and that's really kind of like watering down things. But ever since you told me that, I kind of viewed all these initiatives like, oh, it's just something that was practiced 5 years ago. Let's just pick up where we left off. And so I'm not trying to like, you know, I'm trying to play devil's advocate, but at the same time, I'm like, once you told me that, I kind of took a different view on it. And it's just like, okay, well, now
instead of feeling the pressure, you just see it like a cycle.
Right.
And it's just like, well, you're probably going to run into this 3 years from now, so why not try it right now or see where it goes? And it does, because I speak to other veteran teachers that have been here longer, and they're like, oh yeah, I used to do that, but back then it was called this.
Right.
And some of them even have the old notebooks when they went to training, and I'm just like, wow, okay, and it's pretty much the same. So, yes, I agree, it's become saturated with these initiatives, but like you said, it's a cycle.
It's a cycle.
Once you recognize that, I think there's really no problem.
Like, I don't know if you guys had it here at middle school level, but back when I was in elementary, we used to have thinking maps. So we had to train a whole, like, 2-day training on thinking maps. And one of the veterans teachers was like, oh, we've done this forever. Like, they just called it thinking maps. And then somebody made a lot of money selling it. So.
And you don't see those anymore either.
Nope.
No.
You will in the next 7 years.
Let me ask you, how effective do you think our professional development opportunities are here at either Henderson or at UPISD? Like, do you guys get to choose what you want to go to, or do you just go to whatever they send you? Or
Well, under the math, it's a lot harder to find programs or professional developments to go to for math. Because their idea of thinking is, oh, you're just teaching the numbers and you're teaching the procedure. But there are some opportunities, and they're not in town, which is kind of sad. But, you know, when you want to go to one that you realize, hey, the information that's on the document saying, you know, this is the training or whatever, and you ask, hey, can I, because I have asked, I said, there's this training I want to go to, but it's not here in El Paso, it's somewhere else in Texas. Oh, well, no, we don't have the funds, but here I am trying to make an opportunity to advance my education, my way of teaching, and it gets knocked down. Whereas I see, for example, English tends to go to a lot more trainings because you have more strategies and more things that you've got to get under your wing. But I think, at least for math, on my standpoint, is I find it harder to find a professional development that is actually geared towards teaching the kids, I guess, an easier way of mathematics because of the inclusion and and your GT and your pre-AP, finding a whole variety of ways to teach these kids. At least here at Henderson and in my other school that I was at, I find it very difficult to find somewhere to go to get an extra advantage. So
I feel like it could be really hit or miss, but honestly, on the majority, I feel like the opportunities are not effective. Just because whether it's organization or maybe it's just me, but I do feel like there is usually, especially more recently, there's generally an opinion of the trainings and things that we're going to are just not well done, unfortunately. So, but again, there's something for us, something that aren't. Do we have a choice? I guess we do, but I don't know that I've really seen anything like she said that I wanted to necessarily go to. Like, oh, that looks interesting.
I think a lot of times also it's the facilitators giving the professional development because a lot of it depends on them.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we had a switch in ELAR, and to me, the level of professional development went a little bit down. So I think sometimes it's also the facilitator as well.
A lot of those things that they offer to us should actually be offered to the special ed teachers. I don't see any training for the inclusion teachers on how to help them help us in the classroom.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they just follow what we do.
Right.
They step wherever we step. They follow what we do, and they should have their own training. I think that one's on them.
Do the social studies get to go to a lot of developments or no? No, not really.
No, and I didn't want to say anything, but if you think Matt's having a hard time,
Yeah.
social studies, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, social studies is, in my opinion, an epidemic in education that's across the board throughout the country and everything.
When we had alls, did you guys, or because I was thinking for us, like when we had alls, we had more opportunities. They let us know more about stuff, but now we don't have alls.
No.
So even then,
It was the same. Yeah, and I think it all comes down to several factors: availability. It all comes back to actual facilitators that can give a professional development of social studies. It all depends on the initiative that the district is planning on. You know, how can you tie social studies to thinking maps? How can you tie social studies to active learning? You know, it's always been like that. And I mean, honestly, I think this is a problem because it goes from state to state. You know, you have Common Core with the majority of the country, but like in places like Texas, where in 7th grade you have state history, and then 8th grade you have United States history, and then you're competing against everybody else in the country. So how do you develop that? How do you meet that balance where you have certain states that have a different curriculum than the other states, but at the end of the day, 8th grade, everybody needs to be testing at a certain percentage. It's a disservice, I think, but I can understand why the curriculums are different and everything. So taking all that into consideration, figure out a professional development for the social studies teacher. You know, and it's a huge task that I think districts, states, facilitators, alls, I think it's a huge challenge for them. A challenge that, you know, could be implemented in other areas like math, ELAR, you know, other things and everything. And I think, you know, you can't blame it. You can't blame anybody for that. But that's my opinion. That's my little break.
In what areas are professional development most beneficial? Like, what areas do you see that it affects the most?
I think in our school, and I could be wrong, but from what I've seen, maybe it's because I'm on PBS with the SEL trainings in the professional development. I see a lot of that. I don't know how much they do it in other schools, but like they're really trying to make it a huge district-wide thing. And that's another training that I went to recently, restorative circles, as part of SEL in the classroom. And I do think that there's still a lot of people who are kind of resistant to it, but they're trying to, we're trying to get to the point where we can have that relationship with the students so that we can get them to the point of learning. And so for me personally, I've seen that SEL has been most beneficial. But that's just to me. I don't know what you all think.
Well, with that, we didn't do the SEL back on my old campus. And And so when I heard about it last year, I was kind of like, I don't have time for that, and everything. And then when I went to the training with Mr. Chavez, it was an eye opener. It was kind of like, oh, okay, I get now that it creates a confidence with the kids and a trust where you can let them open up and everything. And then it kind of leads into, okay, so now we've done this. But what's nice is in the development class that we went through, it shows, hey, it's going to lead into, one, you get that trust, and two, they'll come along and work for you. Or, if you're one of those that, no, sit down, do this, ABC. Whereas you're not going to have that acknowledgement, I guess, from the kids to say, yeah, I'm willing to work with you because you believe in me, you've given me an opportunity to voice.
Brandon and Max Moore, please report to the front of the building. The bus is waiting for you.
I agree.
Brandon and Maximus Moore, please report to the front of the building. The bus is waiting for you.
When I talk to my old colleagues, they're like, what? No, that doesn't work. That doesn't do. I'm like, well, if you implement it and you try it, it does work. So I see where it does change the thinking of not only the teacher, but of the kids. So I like it.
No, I agree with you. That's the only one that probably I see that is working. Just the way you work together as a group. That's about it. I mean, I'm not really that experienced with that one, but I've seen it work on this campus for 3 years so far. Yeah.
I know that there's several teachers that just don't feel comfortable doing SEL in their classrooms solely because of one or two students that just take advantage of the time and the audience. So it's not, I think it has a lot to do with the teacher as well. Like as long as they implement it well and they actually care and try. But I have seen it where there's teachers that just don't bother with it.
Right.
And then they want to blame the students sometimes. In what areas is professional development inadequate? Like, let's start with what is not professional development. Like, what is professional development not?
Mine, for me, would be the data talks.
Oh, data talks?
Yeah.
Because you're not really learning anything.
No, you're not. You're just looking what you're doing over there. You could do it here.
Right.
During PLC and not be absent.
Well, and I don't think it's fair to compare one school to another school because your demographics are different. I mean, it would be different if we compare ourselves to just, let's say, Guillen. But you can't compare us to a school on the west side or even the school that's supposed to be linked with us up top. I think it's a complete disadvantage, whereas we should focus on how do we really focus on our kids, not compare them. And that's the problem. I think the other thing is the beginning of the year when we have to do all our retrainings,
right.
For the bloodborne pathogen. Yeah, for all those certificates. They want to go through this whole training, and it's just repetitive, and it's not successful because you sit there and you don't do anything. Nobody's paying attention. So it's ineffective, I think, doing those over and over again.
I think the other one too is the training for the start.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We know it already.
Yeah.
Just give us a file, we'll read it, and that's about it.
Yeah, unless you're a first year teacher.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you've done it.
And whatever changes, there's very minor little changes, just give it to the teachers.
Yeah.
But for me, that's a waste of time too.
I've been at some professional developments here at our school where I see teachers and everybody, like for example, at the beginning of the year, once everybody's chit-chatting and what you do this summer, this is not, and I think it becomes social hour as well.
Yeah.
But I do understand it because I'm one of those people sometimes.
Right.
We don't get to see each other very much outside of our departments all year, so whenever we do get to see someone, I think it's just human to interact with everybody else. Do you think Anderson has school-wide instructional strategies that we use throughout? And are they implemented with fidelity? And how do we know that?
So school-wide meaning like cross-content?
Like if you were doing thinking math, then we'll do thinking math.
I know that the SEL that you mentioned, the social
true.
emotional learning,
Yeah.
that's one thing that
And PBIS.
PBIS.
I think when it comes to academics,
No.
there has not been a consistency, and I think it's because we haven't had it all until recently. And even then, I think the alls are relatively new on what they're doing, so you gotta cut them some slack as well. So, and feel free to back me up anybody you want to. But yeah, I don't think there is consistency, and given those circumstances, given a change in leadership, a change in a direction and everything, I don't think there is. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It is what it is.
Well, when you cross curriculum, you tend to think, okay, well, how is his social studies going to work with my math? And, and we tend to do the correlation, at least with math and reading. We say, oh, well, the kids have to learn how to read an equation and everything. But then I am guilty of saying, well, what do I have to do with social studies? Things like that, or what do I have to do with science? There's no correlation. But I remember a few years back when we used to do all 4 subjects would work together in order to say, 1, we focus on the kids, 2, how can we make it so that each kid is understanding, hey, this leads to this, which leads to this. But it's gotten away from that. It's kind of hard academic-wise.
The only one that's doing the following is the ESL department. They try to follow it.
Do they teach all the content areas?
They try.
To?
They try. They try. I mean, not too long ago, Ms. Begay actually asked them to cover science vocabulary words in the classroom. They try.
Do you think it would be beneficial if we had like one of the staff development days where we could meet with one representative from each content area and kind of come up with ideas or units, or do you think it would work?
I think even as a grade level, this way everybody has an opportunity to voice an opinion or say, hey, let's do this together, and then we can spread it to everybody else.
You're talking like horizontal alignment
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah.
Even for, I think for RTI, we had talked about it, I forget whatever meeting it was, but it was suggested that, like for the days that science, they don't have anybody, so then let me send out as a reading teacher a science article that they could answer questions and use their reading strategies on. So like maybe in that way, but yeah, like helping each other out, I guess, in that way.
We used to do that before you guys were here. We used to ask the science department give us some articles in social studies too. It did work, but then at the end somebody dropped the ball. It was too much for one person.
It's easier, I think, to do in elementary when the teachers are self-contained.
Yeah.
And they have all their content all day long, and I think it's better for them.
I mean, in some elementaries, what they do is that even the PE coach gets involved. Like they have a day where they do math problems based on PE.
We used to have our PE teacher over there, our PE coach. He used to do jumping jacks, and as they were doing jumping jacks, they were reciting the multiplication tables. It was really cool.
Well, piggybacking on that, I was actually going to suggest that I think it works better in elementary schools because in a middle school setting, you have like what, 6 ELR teachers, 7 ELR teachers?
And we're not all doing
And yeah, and then just to get everybody in one room, all right, now let's bring social studies in, it becomes a problem. But I think in the elementary setting, if you're talking about middle school, you're basically looking at one teacher per content. So it's a lot easier for them to bring them in, talk to each other and plan it out, as opposed to, well, there's already 6 ELR teachers, there's 4, 6, 7, 9, you're already talking about 10 teachers in one room. Nothing's going to get done.
Yeah.
Unless, it will get done, but things, Eli's going to be like, well, I'm going to do my thing in ER, and I'm going to do my thing in social studies. And but I think it works better in the elementary setting because of that.
Right.
But that's me.
Do you personally, or with your colleagues, meet, plan, or reflect with other teachers or administrators? And describe a little bit with what happens then.
Of course, you asked us as our department.
Yeah.
Oh, because this one for PLC. Well, the thing is, when I'm with you guys, I see 6th grade planning more than the other grade levels. I love the way they sit together, and they're just, did you get this? Did you get that? They go over their exams. I just wish I could see that more in 7th and 8th, but I don't.
Do you have to say this has been a stellar year for 6th grade as far as that's concerned? 6th grade ELR, we have been working really well as a team.
Very well.
But that doesn't mean that always happens. In past years it hasn't happened. But I don't know. How does that work in math and science? Do you feel like you're?
Well, for math,
sorry, we're changing your second. It's been a long day. Okay.
I know with math that we do sit our 7th grade group, our 8th grade group, and our 6th grade group, and we all work really well as grade level. But when we get together as a big group saying, hey, how can we help you to get to, this, that kind of thing, it's kind of like, no, I know what I'm doing, and it becomes,
Very emotional.
I guess, like, it's like, well, no, I'll stick to my grade level, you stick to your grade level. So majority of the time, our PLCs, they function well. When our department head talks to us, we all, participate in that. But when we break up into our own grade level, we actually are very, focused and get things accomplished, get it done.
Yeah.
That type of thing, which is really nice to have. Whereas, some of the other departments are not like that. So, and it's kind of sad. That, unity isn't there.
Great. So, does social studies plan together, or do you guys do your own lesson plans?
Well, social studies is a kind of a unique creature in that, we do horizontal alignment, whereas like, okay, what are we going to be teaching in 7th grade and everything? Like we talk every now and again, all the 7th grade teachers, like how can we help each other? And then there's vertical alignment where, we're like, okay, and I think it has to do with every single social studies teacher in this school has taught 8th grade at one point in their lives. And so we all know what the ultimate goal is. We all know where we want them to be, 8th grade. So we can start scaffolding those ideas and we can start saying, okay, remember, we're talking about China, but how is it going to relate to United States history? And so I think that's what it is. And then when we plan together as a department, as social studies, we're always keeping that in the back of our minds. That we're always like, yeah, we're going to talk about Russia and Eurasia and everything. Okay, and we're going to talk about the Alamo. Okay, but what's the end result? How is this going to tie with U.S. history? And so that's what we're always keeping in the back of our minds. But if we've already taught it at one point in our lives, and we already know, all the social studies teachers know what the end game is, 8th grade social studies, it's pretty much like, oh, okay, you got this, okay, I'll see you later,
right.
And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, because what works well with one teacher might not work for another teacher. And I think it's more of a mutual respect for one another. Could it be better? Heck, yeah.
I think that's actually a benefit, is that, you're focusing on just one test, whereas we focus on 6th grade tests, we focus on 7th grade, we focus on 8th grade. So each of us is responsible for a test, whereas you guys at least get to develop that whole instructional to lead up to just that one test.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably even easier for us than you all, because we kind of have the same skills. They just get a little more complicated, except for writing, of course, more complex. But with you guys, you still have different things at the grade levels, right? So.
Well, yeah, we have over like 100 teaks that we need to hit.
Right, yeah.
And that's the other thing. It's just like we want to hit all these 100 and plus teaks, but at the same time, the end result is right here in 8th grade. And so how do you develop a strategy where you do that? And I think that's what it helps. Everybody teaching 8th grade at least one point in their careers. So you can know, okay, well, we're going to talk about this, but remember, this is what you got to take with you.
That's pretty
and
neat.
all that. So I don't know. I don't know if it's the best method. But we've been growing a little bit. But again, it's a problem across the board.
Right, and I think you're right. And that would be interesting, because for the longest time I only taught 6th grade, and now I do 7th. So it's interesting to see how I would do teaching in 8th grade. To do what you're saying is everybody should have an opportunity to see that each grade level. That would be interesting to see. And so I'm like deathly afraid of doing 8th grade, but it would be good for me to say, okay, like you said, hey, remember this is going to lead to this. Make sure you remember that.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat.
I kind of like the idea of grouping. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that.
Yeah.
That's like
So I go with my 6th grade.
You'd be following
We did that. We did that a long time ago, Mr. So
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Maldonado was the one that initiated that, and everybody from 7th grade followed the kids to 8th. I'm talking about everybody.
Yeah.
And that's when Ms. Garduño was still teaching. She went from 7th to 8th. It helped a lot as far as in discipline, grades, the STAR test, but it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but it's what I figured is that, for example, these kids that are 8th graders now, I had them for 6, and some of them I had them for 7. So again, talking about the department meeting together, if I have one of the 8th grade teachers, you know what, Juanito keeps acting up, and I'm like, Juanito who? And everything, and they tell me, I was like, okay, I'm going to go talk to him. Like, I've already had that kid for 2 years. I already know what makes that kid tick. And I can talk to him, and I can work with him, or I can work with the teachers, like, you want to try this with Juanito.
Right.
And everything. And so sometimes looping is a good idea. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work because the kids get used to you.
But then you hit the ground running,
Yeah.
because you already know them.
You know their
Yeah,
names. You know
that's
everything.
true.
They know what you're all about. They know they know what's acceptable in your classroom, what is not, and so yeah, it's a double-edged sword, but I think that helps as well.
And with that in mind, I think that everybody, all the ELAR teachers, at some point should teach 7th grade writing, because that
would be
itself is a
good.
beast.
Yeah,
In
I
eighth.
agree.
And eighth,
In
and then
eighth.
eighth because of the SSI year.
Yeah.
Because in 8th grade it's way stressful.
In the SAT, because they also take the SAT.
They also do
Yeah.
this.
That's true.
Okay. What barriers do you face when you're trying to meet with your colleagues, whether it's in PLC or your conference period, that stop you from meeting with your team? And what do you believe Henderson can do to alleviate these barriers and protect collaboration time?
I think that there's just a lot of, well, it's better now, but there's always like something else that needs to be done. You know, for example, right now is the arts and the stuff like that, where everybody has to be out because they're in those meetings, or you know, like, or we've got to, and you know, yes, data, but we've got to do this project with data, or we've got to do this or that, and so like, it just seems to suck up so much time that it doesn't allow us to collaborate the best that we possibly could. We have talked about before, specifically saying that this day is for this day is, but that always seems to just get pushed to the side. So maybe we need to be more strict, I guess, or I don't
Follow
know.
the norm of it.
Yeah, just like be a little more demanding with our time and what that's supposed to be for. But I mean, you know, I could be.
No, you're right, because
maybe more people
in
have
fact that's what we went
suggestions.
through today. Mondays and Wednesdays we're supposed to stay in our classrooms. We asked permission to get ready for our TI, but then we got an email from Mr. Valdez. I need to see you guys because the telepass is not complete, so it threw that out. I mean, it didn't work, and then it was just for 5 seconds.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, it kind of throws that off. You know, I don't know. There's no consistency.
But I think, piggybacking on that, having that idea, I think, again, and it's what you said about comparing schools, you won't see this on a West Side school. You know, you won't see this in a different district school. Because it all comes down to the population. And so I think, given that, and I think given the new accountability system in the STAR, where you have a certain number of economically disadvantaged, I think now they're starting to notice that. I think they're saying, okay, well, I think they have more work to do because they have a different population. Let's rate them at a different scale, as opposed to somebody else that's coming from a different school.
Let's hope they keep that.
Yeah, that's why I remain optimistic about all that.
I mean, it's like this year's better. We're not doing a lot like we used to with data and those huge binders and all that. But still, it's not working because they want us to do this, and before you know it, they want something
And they want
else.
something else. And it's the consistency.
Yeah.
It goes back to
Towards.
consistency.
Do you think it's gonna be better once we have the new AB schedule, or do you think it's gonna be the same thing?
I've never experienced it, so I don't know.
Well, the AB schedule, I've been through it, and you won't be hit by it. The ones that get hit are social studies and science and electives. Because ELR and math will see your kids every day, and so it's not a big effect. What affects them the most is going to be the science and the social studies, because you see those kids every other day, and you have to remember, oh wait, where did I leave off with these kids? You know, every class is going to be different, and so I think that's going to be your hardest struggle for science and social studies is making sure you're still on track with everything. And then you have kids that were absent one day, and then they're there the next day, but it's not your day to have them, and so now they're like a day and a half behind at this point. And so I think that's a negative effect of an AB schedule.
Also for writing, I mean, you guys in 6th and 8th, they won't feel it. It's actually 7th grade because we have the writing.
Right.
And even though they say, well, you're supposed to teach the reading and the writing together,
You
sometimes
can't.
you have to separate it. No,
Yeah.
you have to separate it. So it's gonna be a
Yeah,
challenge.
so you'll be
Whoever's
the
gonna
same
teach,
then.
yeah.
You'll be the same.
Yeah, that's the reason why a lot of teachers don't want to be in 7th grade next year because it's going to be different. I went through the AB schedule a couple of years here, and it does a number on you, especially during PLC,
Right.
because you do lose your PLC time.
Right, because you're down to one conference.
Yeah, so that means you're going to use your own prep time for PLC.
So it'd be like one day, like Monday, Wednesday, Fridays would be PLC, Tuesday, Thursdays would be your prep.
Your prep.
Isn't that what they do in other
Some of the other
schools in
campuses,
general?
yeah.
Like,
Some
they
do
don't
it
have
after
PLC
school.
every day?
Some will say, let's just make
Yeah.
one day our PLC. And because that's what we used to do. One day was PLC, one day was grade level, and then the rest was your time.
But then things come up, so they'll ask you, "Can we meet? I know you're not supposed to," and you lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've never done AP either, but I've heard horror stories, and I'm kind of in the social studies setting. My big dilemma is when you're so used to teaching in a certain method and the kids are used to learning in a certain method, 45 minutes, go, and everything. Now it's just like 45 minutes, 90 minutes, go, and everything. And so now it's just like these kids are already kind of programmed that, social studies, just sit back, hear the teacher, take notes, and then get out and everything. And now it's a good and a bad thing because now it's like, oh, let's make maps and everything. And the kids are like, I never did maps before. Why am I doing maps now? And so it's just like, personally, I'm scared for it. Because I'm already, I already have, okay, I got 15 minutes to do this, 5 minutes to do that, 5 minutes to review, 20 minutes for independent work, 5 minutes to review, and exit note, and that's it.
Well, it's the same now, it's a little bit longer.
Yeah.
My issue with the AP schedule is for social studies and science, how are the kids going to retain all that information?
Exactly.
2 days after.
And then they're absent, so sometimes you won't see
they have trouble retaining day to day.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a bigger issue than.
I remember in high school we did an AP schedule. There was a lot of homework for science and social studies. So do you feel like you'll give extra homework, so that they can try and?
See, I think that I would definitely give extra homework, but I would use the time during the classroom to review the homework to see if there were any discrepancies or any misunderstandings. But again, eventually the kids are going to be like, oh, I don't have to do it. He's going to review it.
Maybe you can do the flipped classroom where you do the lessons online. And then
I was actually doing that. I was thinking about that. Is it a good idea in this population though? It's just I would be willing to.
To do the flip, I think we need more instruction.
Right.
We need more.
Yeah, I think that's where I need more help.
Especially since we have the Macs. I've gone to the Apple trainings at the Apple store, and they've been pretty neat. But to come back and implement it, it's time. One, it's time consuming, and two, I forget. So I'm like, wait, what did they tell me to do? So we need that professional development in order to really get a good grasp of, okay, I can do it. That confidence, because I'm like, I can't do it.
Okay, and then the very last question for you guys. Get out of here. What is the professional development that you wish you could have either soon or over the summer that would help you for next year? Is there anything on your mind that you would say, I want that because it's going to help?
I have one. I don't know about you guys, but for ELA, is they need to give us a training where they want us to plan based on what they want to see in the classroom. Instead of them coming in and say, well, we're not seeing it. Well, you're not seeing it because you're not teaching us. Like, you're not supposed to teach to the start, but at the same time, they want you to do it in a different way. So during the summer, instead of taking us to those schools where we spend most of the time walking from our car to wherever we're supposed to go, train us on how to write lesson plans together on what they want to see. Based on the star and following their needs. Because Isleta does that. They have a book called The District, and all their lesson plans are there for the whole year. So the teacher, instead of sitting down wasting hours and hours trying to write what is it they want to see, is there, so they only plan on, okay, what am I going to use for this? They want me to do this, this, and this. I have this, and you're done. That's what they call it. Yeah, that's why they call it The District, because they have it done already. That's the reason why their scores have gone up. And they're close to Socorro now, even though they can't reach the level. They're getting there.
I think also for ELAR, they recently changed our standards. They took us and they told us, and so it's going to be, so usually our units are, okay, this one is fiction, this one is nonfiction, this one is persuasive, whatever. But now it's going to be more mixed because, I guess that's what the standards are going through. So we talked about it a tiny bit at this last data talk or whatever it's supposed to be. And so now it's going to be more like spiraled, like we're going to have to touch every unit, like every single subject kind of in a way within the units. So I'd like to have training on that, like how can I implement that more in my classroom? Maybe the way we're doing it now with hitting something every day, I don't know, but that would be great to see.
Kind of like a thematic unit. Yeah.
Is that what they used to call it?
Yes.
It has rotated around.
You see something?
Back in the day.
Full circle. I personally would like to see more, like you said, technology, especially in history. Because I mean, yeah, history can be so cut and dry, and I just think that that's the missing component in social studies, technology, virtual tours, and everything. And in that sense, the flipped classroom, which I always loved the idea, but I've only been introduced to it because I picked up an article when I was in college. You know, it's never been mentioned to me. It's never been, you know what I mean? And so like, I love the idea because I mean, that's when I read it. You correct me if I'm wrong, but when I read it, it seemed more like it was more like a college setting where the kids did the work. They did the bulk of the work at home, and then in class, you guys just reviewed it. We would just talk about it. We just have a casual conversation and everything. And I always love that idea because I mean, that's how the people grow. At this day and age, it's all about interacting, collaborating, and communicating. But have I ever seen it done in a social studies setting? No. And so that's why I personally would like that training and technology, because technology is everywhere. I'm afraid. I don't know if you guys can agree with me. I'm afraid of the kids using the laptops because I can't be everywhere at once.
Right.
So I don't know if somebody's doing the work while somebody is YouTubing it, and if they're YouTubing something they're not supposed to YouTubing it. You know. So I would definitely like to have more training on technology and the use of it.
I agree. Well, I would like more technology, and I think it's interesting because when I talked to my brother, he was trying to do it, but he wanted to do it so that he could have, I guess, the technology itself, like the camera, to show I'm doing the work. Because if you're writing, you can't see the work here. So he's trying to figure out, well, how can I make it so when you see those videos for math and you can actually see how they're writing and things like that. That's what would be kind of neat to have, is say, okay, well, here's a mini lesson that I created in case you don't get it, or here's an intro to it, here's the lesson. Well, you can't see, if I'm writing, you can't see what I'm writing, but there is a specific board, I guess, that reflects it upside down to come up correctly. And I think having that kind of technology, because that's what they want us to do, is use technology, but they don't want to dish out the money.
Right.
And that's the problem is, well, if you want me to do something, that you want, well, you got to give me some leeway. And I think that would be pretty neat, is having technology that will help us out.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. I appreciate all your input and your feedback. And thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Look out for digital thinking apps in the next 7 years.
Very good.
Cool.
It's gonna get to the point. I don't know, because they was telling me it's gonna go to the point where, you know how if they don't see the